All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. As always, today's sponsor is Authors Unite. And if you want to become a successful author, Authors Unite is the place to go. So head on over to authorsunite.com to check out a free case study that'll teach you how to do exactly that. And now let's jump into the episode. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. Today, I have Justin Kavanaugh with us, and he has worked with thousands of athletes of all ages and is a best-selling author of the book called Man Up. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Grateful to have you on. So the first one we ask on this show is, what is the best story from your life that has an underlying valuable message?
Well, I think, the best story for me comes down to when I made this shift from being an athlete to now being a coach. And I think we could look at things, a lot of different ways, but, I think everybody, as they're young, they evolve, and normally what gets them from point A to point B isn't what's going to take them from point B to point C. So they have to change. And when you're, when you're an athlete and then you go through that shift, sometimes it's not on your timing. It's on God's timing, right? Or it's on, a team's timing, somebody that has another decision. And I thought mine happened way too soon. So I had to change quickly because, when I was probably at the peak of my athletic career, I fell through a roof 25 feet and broke my back. I went from being an All-American one day to not being able to walk the next. And that changes the lens in which you look through life and the things that you value. So for me, it was like going through this transformation where I knew I always wanted to coach, but not now. And at that point I had to make a decision, do I just kind of stay in bed and just, bitch, moan, and complain, or do I do something about it? And that's when it started to really evolve into a full-time role. But I think a lot of times, like we play part-time roles in our life, and we don't want to go all in because it's not what we're fully, invested in. And when you're able to go all in, that's when everything could start to change. So once I realized that, my athletic career wasn't going to happen, and the schedule that I wanted, then I needed to still pursue whatever was next for me full speed. And that was coaching. And that's really when I was really able to start to see like transformational changes, not these, not short bits. So that was like the big shift for me.
Damn, dude. So, and I'm sure, it's kind of a negative thing, but I just like to go back to it. Like, so you literally fell like 25 feet up and then broke your back. And this is when, so say like All-American, like what sport and stuff, like what was happening when that happened?
So I'm originally from Miami, kind of where you are now. I made a little bit of a shift in my life, but so I played 5 sports when I was in high school, and I was an All-American football player coming out of Dade Christian down in South Florida, going to play college ball. And in my first year there, I was actually back home. Believe it or not, I was in Boca, and just working with a couple of guys. I was actually trying to learn a little bit from a couple of the other coaches that were in the area. And I was up on a ceiling, and unfortunately I stepped on a beam that was a false beam and went right through. So I landed like an Olympian, but unfortunately gravity took its toll coming down. And that's when it changes things really quickly. And I think that when you get hurt, that's when you first realize that, like, ooh, you're not Superman anymore. It changes things. Now, being a little bit older, you wake up in pain and you're just glad that you're in pain, because that means you're breathing.
Yeah.
But when you're younger, man, you just don't feel anything. You just keep going and you're like, you're okay. You run through a wall, you get hit, and all of a sudden you just keep moving. And with something like that, is that traumatic, it fast forwards your aging process, and it changes your scope really quickly.
Yeah, man. And I could say, so I'm 27, but and maybe you're like, dude, you don't know anything yet. But like, I can honestly say, man, I feel a difference. Like, I can't do what I used to be able to do at like 18 to 20.
Well,
Like,
it just depends on how much fun you have when you're younger. Like, if you beat your body up and had a lot of fun, then you'll pay the price a little later.
Yeah, because, dude, sometimes it hurts now. And I'm like, dude, I thought
look, it all comes down to the cost of doing business, right? If I had a lot of fun, but I wasn't responsible, it starts to add up at some point physically.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that, man. The next one I got for you is, what is the most valuable piece of information we should know that's within your expertise or industry?
Yeah. So like for me, my background training athletes and being one, I look at everybody like a high performer. So, there's kind of like tips and tricks that you can work with athletes to kind of get them in like their peak state associated with like their sport, right? Where, if anyone that's listening right now, they've ever played a sport, or if they've ever been, doing something that they're really, really good at, even if it's like an instrument. I want you guys to think about, the time where, let's say you're playing a sport and somebody calls a play, and you don't even know what they're saying. Like at some point you're like, I don't even remember what my job is associated with you know, that play. But the minute that the ball snapped or the whistle's blown or you start, you go right into what you're supposed to do. And like on a film, on the outside, nobody could tell that you weren't sure what was going on. And that's what I consider like peak state or flow state. That's what I consider you being like in your zone of focus. So as an athlete, we're trying to get into that, and it's just because we've prepped it and we've practiced so long and hard beforehand that when it comes time for the game, that we don't even think anymore. We're just doing. But in our lives, like daily, as now owning a business and now working with other people, I just teach those same strategies and tactics that I taught to high level athletes at the college pro level and the Olympic level to executives now. And if you could start to treat your body like it's a business and almost like the game and the business that you're playing as a sport, then what happens is all you want to do is get into a peak state. So for me, it's like everyone's going to have whatever their peak time is. Your circadian rhythms, are individual, but everyone generally is going to have certain zones in which they focus the best. And if you could do the most productivity work and you could protect that at all costs. So your goal is, number one, is find the time that you focus really well. Like I'm a night owl, right? My wife is an early riser. So I try to get most of my work done at night because that's where I'm able to focus. So I want to find my peak time, and then I want to protect it at all costs. So I want to make sure that nobody can interrupt me so I could do my work. Because what happens is we get in a zone, and then all of a sudden we're asked to do something else, and then we become basically like firefighters where we always have to put out a problem, and we don't want to do that. We want to protect what is the most important time in our life so we could become that high performer, that elite athlete, just in whatever we're trying to do that day. And then we want to try to expand it. So we want to first find it, then we want to protect it, and then expand it. Because the longer that you could stay in that zone, the longer that you could stay in that peak performance focus time, the more likely that you're able to get certain things done. And we've all been in the situation where, we're hyper focused and we're productive. We do something for a half hour, 20 minutes, and it's more work than we do the rest of the day because we're distracted and we have so many things going on. And that's the key. So for me, it all comes down to identify, where your peak state is, protect it at all costs, and then expand it.
Yeah, totally. And I think so. Just curious, because so for me, like how I was able to find mine. So like going into like writing a book, right? What worked is writing 1,000 words or an hour every morning. So I'd go for like a walk or a run, come back, and I'd go like fairly early, like 5 or 6 a.m. Get back, start working like 7:30. And that's what worked for me. Like I could never have finished my book if I was like writing it at nighttime. So I guess I'm more like your wife in this scenario. But like, how did you discover, was it just trial and error that you were just like, you tried to do the early mornings and you're like, screw this just doesn't work for me?
I so frankly, I mean, I just couldn't. I'm not like one of those people, and I'm not like one of those like hustle entrepreneur type personalities that are like saying, hey, if your feet don't hit the ground in the morning and you're like excited with passion to do your job, then you're a
Yeah.
loser. Like I wake up and it's slow and it's like, oh my god, like I don't get out of bed. But once I get going, man, I got so much momentum behind me. I'm a Mack truck coming at you. It's gonna be hard to stop me. So you just got to figure out like where are you strong, and then what happens is once you stop fighting against that, once you just understand, okay, that's who you are, then you have to like set up certain things around your day to organize around it. So for me, I mean, I always had problems going to sleep at night. And then I realized like, well, maybe if I can get more work done. But what I do is I'll set up myself to have a nightly routine instead of a morning routine. right? So everyone talks about having morning routines. And so maybe running for you, a walk or something like that is your trigger, right? That gets you going and then starts your habit of getting in that flow state. Well,
Yeah.
I need to have a nighttime routine. So you have a nighttime routine and you always want to build routines around that time so you can protect it. So whatever that may be, for some people it's lunchtime, right? So they take a gap in their day. But whatever it is, that's what I would do. And I would like to think about like, where do you come up with the most creative ideas, and then where are you probably the most productive when you're doing your work? Like I think, for those people that work in an office, right, like the open office concept is like the most criminal thing in the world, because like everyone's looking at you, they're staring at your screens, they're trying to see like where you're productive, and people have different ways that they focus, right? Sometimes they need to put headphones on. Some people like loud environments, but if that's distracting to somebody else, then unfortunately it creates a bad environment for everybody, right? Because you walk in a room and there's just one person that's in a bad mood, like it affects everybody. So you have to create your environment to protect your peak state too. So once you find it, like you got to create your environment around it. So sometimes what I do with a lot of my athletes and entrepreneurs is I find basically environments that they work really well in. And then that's where we start to identify like, well, when do you normally go there? Because if they go to a certain room or a desk or they go for a drive and that's what helps them start to think, maybe we could start the process by having them go there first instead of it being to get away from something.
Yeah, man, dude, I couldn't agree more. I've been to a few offices down here in Miami of like bigger corporations, and some of them have like that open door policy, and like that would never in a million years work for me, dude. Like if at any second somebody could interrupt me, I would never get a damn thing done ever. It would be impossible. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. The next one is, and it ties in. But the next one is, what's your best piece of overall business advice? So not necessarily industry specific.
Yeah, I think the best piece of advice is don't work. Because you enjoy what you do, you shouldn't have to work. Learning is hard. Like I'm not saying like learning is easy. I'm not saying work is supposed to be easy, but whatever you do, you should be enjoying the process. And I think so many people are always looking at the end goal because they have this like huge ambition. But what happens is their actions do not align with their ambitions. So when you see this, now all of a sudden, like their actions are going to take them on a different course. They're going to be drifting away from that original track that they're on. But if your actions align with your ambitions, then all of a sudden you'll get little wins. So for everybody I work with, whether it be athlete, entrepreneur, doesn't matter the sport or industry, it really just comes down to making sure that you do what you enjoy. Because if you don't, like it's going to be miserable. Like you'll spend more time at your job with your coworkers or your clients than you are going to be with your family. And I'd hate that to be in an area that which you don't like or enjoy. So to me, it all comes down to like making sure that your actions align with your ambition. Because if they don't, then all of a sudden there's going to be a rift there. When I had the opportunity to write the book with you, I mean, you helped me kind of formulate kind of like the organization of it. And for me, it was just a come to Jesus meeting with an athlete. And I just got frustrated with kids that weren't getting the results that they wanted. And if the kid's frustrated, then I just need to say, okay, here's the map. Here's the game plan. Because if you go off course, no shit, you're going to be, late, right? Like if we don't follow the GPS, you're going to get lost. And I think that's what's hard is like people have kind of carved out the road for us and we just don't listen. We want to do everything our own way. Now, I like innovation, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, like we don't want to make the our worlds harder for us, right? We want to make it easier so that innovation could actually come.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more with what I do with podcasts and books. Like I really enjoy it. So it really doesn't like podcasting. Like when some people look at my calendar and they're like, dude, you're doing like 10, 15 interviews in a day. They're like, dude, that looks nuts. I'm like, I love it though. So I think that is actually key. And I mean, this is a whole nother big conversation, but I think that's where kind of the school system kind of fails in a sense is they focus you on going to college for you to get a job to make money. And they forget the point of like finding your strengths and like going there. But that's
like the school system came from, like, as far as like the structure of it came from the factory industry is not having enough workers that were falling in line. Like they were starting to get out of line a little bit. So they needed to start training the behaviors. So they created those restraints and limits and boxes in order to get them to have more workers that were in line with just doing a specific task. Right. Go read a book called Dumbing Us Down. And I mean, that just talks about the whole like educational system in America. But I mean, it really just comes down to, if you're frustrated with the educational system, then be part of the solution, not the problem. And I think that's what you're doing with the book side of things. That's what I'm doing when I now teaching as a coach now. So I think sometimes, we bitch, moan, and complain about the problem, but then like, well, what are we doing about the solution?
Yeah, that's true. I agree. Yeah, well, yeah, it is. It's a big conversation. I think I heard like Seth Godin, if you're probably familiar with him. He did a talk or something. I think it was like a TED talk where he talked about that, where like, yeah, the whole school system was designed to create more like factory, like you're saying, like factory workers. And now, but it's like almost 2020 now. It's like, I think we should change this shit up, don't you?
I think that when you're starting to see like some of the most successful people like actually move away from the school system, right? And academics, it's not because they're not smart individuals. It's because that they're not moving at the pace in which they're ready to learn. Imagine, look, we all learn at different speeds and different styles. Imagine if the school system was individually designed based upon your needs, meaning, when I was ready to move faster, they gave it to me. But when I needed to slow down, then they explained it. And if I had a specific interest and I wanted to do it, then instead of it being elective, it was a main course. And then all of my other courses were driven around that. But in order for that to happen, you have to go through, grade school, you have to go through go through high school, then you have to go through your undergrad. And then when you start to get into your master's program, even the first part of the master's program isn't fully dialed into what you're trying to accomplish. It's still just bits and pieces of it. And nowadays it's so outdated because the professors are not even the ones that are doing the work. They're teaching you things that are completely outdated because they've never been in the workforce. So, you have to go through almost 10, 15 years before you start focusing on the thing that was exciting. And what happens if that changes for you? I deal with so many people that, they are excited about one thing and they're excited about another thing. And then their passion evolves. Well, 10 years into it, now you've just spent, almost probably $500,000 on your education, and you're nowhere closer than you were if you dropped out of college and you started, working right away and got some experience. So now I'm not going to encourage anybody to do that because I do believe that nobody could take that piece of paper away from you. But at the same time, I think we need to do a better job of educating our youth in what they're trying to accomplish. And I think it's going to start now with leadership. But it's also, I think, going to happen naturally because kids are going to start to get pretty tired because they have so much accessibility to knowledge, right? When you and I grew up, I'm a little older than you, but even then there wasn't, Google and Facebook and, Twitter weren't there as readily accessible to us to then just get information immediately. Now we have different platforms for different, learning types. So if you're a visual learner, then Instagram's going to grab your attention, right? If you're, a written person, then you're going to be able to see things a little bit quicker, on Twitter. It's not that hard. But kids these days, they can find anything they want in 2 seconds. And we didn't have that luxury. We actually had to kind of hustle our way to even get the opportunity to learn so that we appreciate things a little bit differently. But nowadays, I think it's going to have to evolve because if not, then what's going to happen is the kids that we're teaching are going to become our bosses.
Yeah, no, I do agree. Like, I think it will naturally evolve because if not, just like access to information, more and more kids are just going to not participate, right? Because they're going to see like the kids that don't go. And again, it's not like saying you shouldn't go to school. It really depends on what you want to do. But for me, that's what kind of happened when I decided to drop out after being there 2 years. Is I was like, I don't think like what I wanted to do, it was going too slow. Like I wasn't good at accounting in the business school, so they wanted to give me more accounting, but I was like, I don't think I'm going to be an accountant anyway, so I don't know why this matters. This is just a waste of time for me. So, and then once I started to actually double down on my strengths, which are things like this, like podcasting and books, that's when things actually started to work out. And yeah, so I just think, like you're saying, gearing it towards what the person actually wants would be really beneficial, rather than be like, you're not good at calculus, let's make you take more calculus and make you miserable. So, but that was a good riff on education. So the next one I got for you is, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
I think that, the older we get, the smarter our parents become. you know and I think what ends up happening is we don't start to see that until we make those mistakes, and we don't want to listen to them. So instead of saying, hey, listen to your parents more, I would say that I would take more advantage of them. My parents gave me every opportunity I wanted to be used as a resource, but sometimes we didn't take advantage of them. So if I had to go back to my younger self, I would say, hey, take advantage of the resources that are available to you. One of the things that I think is interesting is, we all evolve and we all grow, but we always look at certain people in our lives, and we're always reminded of like where we met them. So sometimes we don't grow with them together. And I think what's going to happen is people, some of your friends, right, when you're, as you're going through both, whether it be school or college or even, early stages of work, they're gonna go on and become pretty successful. So if you treat them like an asshole, well, guess what's going to happen that one day when you need a favor? I probably, wish I could go back to certain my school days and say, hey, I treat somebody a little bit differently, because not because they could help me now, but because, it's the right thing to do. And our paths have aligned, later on in life. And
Yeah.
I think that, you want to take advantage of those opportunities in front of you. And I think that sometimes you are, you miss out on your greatest opportunities because you do not take advantage of your current resources. You do not make where you are the big time, right? So everybody has this idea that they want to go to a certain place. They want to make X number of dollars. They want to own they want to own this big company. They want to buy this huge house, but they don't ever appreciate the small apartment they're in. And if they learn to appreciate that, well, then they can actually live in a place that they like. And I think it's the same thing with your friends. It's the same thing with your business. It's the same thing with, whatever your goals are, is wherever you are, make that the big time.
Mm-hmm. So I think it ties in. So the next one, kind of going a little bit down a different path. In your opinion, what's the key to happiness?
Never be content with where you are, but be content with the path that you're on.
That's good, man. Explain a little bit of that. That's good stuff.
My mom used to get really frustrated with me because I used to say that I wanted to do this, or like once I won something, I didn't really appreciate the success of it. And I think that, that comes down to a lot of different personalities have this, where it's like they don't really enjoy the successes because it's like, that's what we were supposed to do. But every time that I would, win an award or have some success or something would happen, my mom would look at me and be like, you're not content, and I want you to be happy. And I used to say that to her because I'm not content with where I am. I always wanted more, but I was content with the path that I'm on. And it's like, if your path is aligned with, the things that you want to accomplish, then you're going to find success along the way, and you're going to enjoy it. But if you're content with where you are, then you're going to settle. Like, stagnation kills everything, right? Just like in sales, like time kills all sales. It's going to kill every deal you have, even if it's a deal with yourself. So if we know that time kills all deals, it's going to kill the deal that you have with yourself to accomplish the goal that you want.
So my next one is, what is the best book that you've read, and what was the number one thing you learned from that?
Ooh, best book. So I'm a book junkie now because I didn't read anything growing up.
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty hard to like isolate one thing. But I'd say, one of the most critical books that I've ever read was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Still to this day, it's a reference book. It's a requirement for anyone that works for me, is that they have to read it. And I think that you'll reread a book later on in your life, and because you're in a different place, it means something totally different to you. But so that's probably, the best book that I've read. Most important book to me is the Bible, but I'd also say like the one that I haven't written yet.
And then what is your favorite quote and why?
Pat Riley said, hard work never guaranteed anything, but without it, you don't have a chance.
Yeah, I like that. So dude,
I got to throw the Miami in there, right? Because you're down there. I got to throw a little history. It is what it is, right? You got to play the audience a bit.
So dude, thanks for coming on. The last one I got for you, where can our listeners find you online?
Well, you could go to Coach Cav, KAV.com or CoachKavanaugh.com. If you're interested on the training side of performance, you could go to Train SSI. I own a company called the Sport and Speed Institute. It's an athletic development company. We have a pretty large facility here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. But I think what's really cool is you helped me publish a book, Man Up, and it's on Amazon. I think one of the coolest stories that I probably haven't told before is so I see you at the airport, right? We had a meeting right at the Marriott right by the airport so we could catch up before the book was all done. And I don't even think you know this story, which so it's kind of cool. But I told you we're going to meet. We go through like kind of the whole game plan and everything else. We're locking out like what's going to happen after the book launch and everything. And I was confused because I've never done it before. And I got a call from my wife and she's like, hey, you got to come. And her water broke. And that's when I left. And I remember I paid for the bill and I was like, hey, enjoy lunch, take care of it. I was like, hey, gotta go. And my first son was born. So it was incredible. And I remember you handled everything, from start to finish after that. Cause I was just like, just get it done. Cause like, I want to focus. So there's a huge testament to like kind of like working with really good people. And then also I think it was kind of cool because, I'll never forget that. Right. And it was kind of cool to have that kind of come to, fruition where it's like, I was meeting with you and then next thing you know, I'm in the hospital. And then when I got out of that and everything kind of settled down, I had a book published and I didn't even know it. And that's a really good feeling. So I appreciate the help that you did for me. But it's also something that, it gave me it put a lot of fire underneath my, my rear to probably do more of that. So it's exciting.
Yes, man. Dude, thanks for sharing that. And thanks again for coming on.
I appreciate it.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.